Hey folks, welcome to the channel. In today's build, I'm going to be making a chef's knife out of the explosion pattern Damascus I made in a previous video, and I'll link to that up here. Please like and subscribe, it helps me a lot, and follow me along for this build. I wanted to make an integral bolster for this knife, and you see me try to do that on the press here. I ended up not having enough steel and ended up hammering this flat into a flat tang, but oh well. So here I'm normalizing the blade, and I really think this is a cool part of this process. You can actually see kind of a shadow move across the blade, and I've done this in real time so you see what that looks like. Sorry folks, I missed turning on the camera for the quench. The blade came out of the quench just a little bit warped. I was able to straighten it on the anvil. So the blade's straight, but the tang is a little curved, which is fine. It's easy to fix. Actually, I've done this so many times, I don't know why I didn't do this before. I made this little straightening jig. It's got a slot here. I can move these two back and forth, and then I can just tighten this bolt to apply pressure against the other side. So this should help me a lot. So let's straighten this tang. I've wrapped the blade in in a cold cloth here just to make sure it doesn't heat up. I've got a propane torch. I'm going to heat the tang and then slowly tighten this bolt. I'm going to mill the shoulders in this knife, and I figured I'd show you how I do my setups in the mill for those of you that have a mill. The challenge has always been, you know, you want to do this shoulder, and then a line that goes across so your tang is a little recessed so your knife sits on top of your guard really nicely. So that's always a challenge because you got to flip the knife over and move it out of the vise. So what I do is clamp a filing guide. First you kind of rig it up, snug it up, clamp the filing guide so you have a reference when you flip it over. For this one it's a little more complicated because you'll see that this is already beveled a little bit, and here is a little narrower than here, so I don't want it to sit on the parallels at an angle. So what I've done, it's a little complicated, is hang a couple parallels off the edge. You'll notice on this file guide I actually happen to have a nice little recess right here. So I hang a parallel here so that the file guide will sit on the parallel. So now the file guide is sitting on the parallel, which is keeping the knife level, okay, this way, because it's locked in here equal. And then I can tighten this down and then tighten the file guide really snug. And I should be good to go after I tighten my vise. Just make sure you're not going to cut into your parallels here. There we go. Okay, so for my setup, I use an 1/8 inch, so I use an 1/8 inch cutter to do both the shoulders. And I always do that first because you only need to do this, and then the tang here. So I've done all that, then I switch the cutter to, I'm gonna use a 1/2 inch cutter, and I've already zeroed this edge. So then I'm gonna use a 1/2 inch cutter and just come down across the tang along this axis. And then I can flip it over, the cutter's still in there, it's still zeroed down that same line. So I finished all the grinding, came out really nice. Now it's time for the hand sanding. Let's talk about hand sanding. So it's not really a choice everyone wants to just take their blade down to 400 or, higher on the belt sander. It's a matter of skill, and it's so easy to damage a blade almost to the point of not being able to bring it back or making a much different blade. So that's why I don't go all the way down to really low grits on the belt sander. I don't have the skill on the belt sander to do that. So I take mine maybe to an 80 grit, and then I'm doing hand sanding. And for me, I start at a 220, and I like to use rolls like this. Not actually this one, that's one I bought by mistake, but this one I really like. This is this Duragold. This one's a 400, but I mean, this roll, and I've used probably 2/3 of this roll. It comes about that thick, and these are only like $20. So it's a really good deal, and they have an adhesive back. You can peel this off, and I like to just stick it. I kind of spray it a little bit so it doesn't stick too much. I like to use a file, and I use a file that's rounded on one side and flat on the other, and I just bend over the edges so I get a nice crisp edge because it's steel. Never use wood, a block of wood, because that will just soften all the edges of your knife, and you want nice sharp edges. So I love using a file. Some people say, oh, doesn't it damage you, if you miss? I think I've ever missed like once, and then you just got a little more work to do to take that off. But it gives you more aggressive, because it's got ridges on it, so it works really well. And then I'll use something like this to do like the plunge lines and kind of be able to rotate it. The most important thing on hand sanding, you gotta alternate your direction between grits. I'll start 220 going this way, and then when I go to 400, I'll go 45 degrees. If you don't do that, you'll never know if you get the scratches out from the previous grit. They're amazingly apparent once you start going the other direction. As far as a lubricant, some people use WD-40. I find that just gets really messy. I love Windex because then you don't have any issues with rust on the blade. I've used water before, but if you miss a spot, or the underneath of the blade will, as you're doing it, gets rusty. So I just like Windex. And I'll go up. This is any of my Damascus blades I take to 1,000. Some people stop at 400, some at 800, whatever your preference. Mirror finish, you gotta probably go to 3,000. One of these, I'll put a link in the video to the tool video where I just talked about this, which is a knife maker's vise. Really useful, so these are invaluable. Anyways, that's how I do my hand sanding. Time to etch this baby. Okay, time to etch. I've cleaned the blade with acetone. Make sure it's nice and clean before it goes in the etch. This is ferric chloride. I'll leave it in for 3 to 4 minutes. I'll bring it out. I'll use some of this 2000 on it just to knock down the oxides, and then I'll repeat probably 3 times, and then we'll see what we get. I'm ready to do the bolster for this. I'm going to use brass for this, which I don't normally do, but I'm going to on this one because I think it's going to look nice, and I'm going to brass spacer between the handle materials. So I've cut this piece of brass. I've actually milled both sides so I know it's perfectly square. So now I'm just going to take some calipers, see what our thickness is here. Looks like 126. Yeah, we'll go with 126, and it's 57. So I've used the indicator. If you never use one of these, it's really simple. You touch off one side, you zero your DRO, which is your digital readout, and this thing it spins around. And when you get close to the part, it starts getting tighter, and as soon as it touches the part, it'll kick off like this and stay like that, so you know you've got the edge. Then you go to the other side, you do the same thing, and then my DRO and most DROs have a half. So you just touch both, you can indicate both sides, and then you take the half, you know what the center is exactly. And then I just indicated each end of the vise, and now I've got this exactly in the center. I'm gonna take this out, put a drill bit, an 1/8 inch drill bit in, and drill my center, and then I'll be able to go back and forth. And there we have our bolster. Okay, we're ready for handle fit up. I've got the blade here, tapered the tang. I've got a little piece of brass here. I just went through with the mill. You saw me put the 1/8 inch slot here, and with just a little bit of filing, it fits up really nice. Fits up nice against the thing here. It needs to be ground down, obviously. I've already done, I just took a piece of, this is zebra wood. I have a piece of brass, just a piece that I cut out there, did the same thing, and then a piece of African blackwood. I just glued those together, and then fits up really nice. There, fits up really nice. And the first thing I'm gonna do is actually, you can see, I don't know if you can see it in the camera, and this happens, it's a little bit off. So the first thing I like to do is square up the actual handle material, because I'm gonna put a pin, a brass pin, just to finish the brass look, kind of about here. So I want to square this up first, just so my pin's not at a weird angle. So let's take it to the grinder and square that up. Now that I've got it all squared up, I'm just going to draw the tang on the side here. Just to make sure when I put the pin, okay, that I'm going to make sure it goes through the tang. So I'm going to put the pin right about here. And the trick here is to go down with the drill and just touch the tang. Don't try to drill through the tang, because you'll start to mess up the wood. So just do a nice clean hole through the wood, touch it, take it out, then drill the tang, then put it back and drill through. All right, so I got the hole all drilled through it. Next step for this, I'm actually going to, I want to shape the handle with the bolster on it. What I'm actually going to do is put some pins. I'm just going to put brass pins through the wood into here, and then epoxy this right on there, and then shape the whole handle. I'm not going to be able to shape the bolster with the blade on it, so it's all got to be done like this. Okay, so I need my pins with a point, so I've chucked up the pin into my drill. I'm going to spin it reverse. I'm going to turn on the grinder, and I'm just going to put a little point on it. So I got my pins placed in here. I'm just gonna, and usually I just give it a little tap, and I got my pins. I'm just gonna do
Okay, and I got my pinholes. Okay, I'm gonna go drill those, epoxy it up, and then I'll be able to shape my handle.
Well, the part I don't like about doing brass, and the reason I put the pins here, is because when you grind brass on the grinder, it conducts heat really well. So what happens is the brass piece here heated up so well that it separated these two pieces. So what I ended up doing is putting pins between those pieces as well, and hopefully that will help it a little bit. I've had this problem with copper before when I use copper accents. And what I may end up having to do is, after I get the profile, I might actually have to do that with a hand file. So we'll see. Otherwise it's just really slow because you got to grind it, let it cool, grind it, let it cool. Well, we'll see how it goes. I finished the rough sanding on this handle. It's time to put it on the blade. Before I can do that, I need to finish this area. So that's why I like these. It's adhesive backed tape, sandpaper. I can just stick it here. Just go back and forth with this until I get what I want. Okay, I'm ready to glue the handle to the knife. I've mixed up some 2-part epoxy. You gotta mix this really well. And then, this is kind of a pain, but you gotta get it to go in here. We'll wipe off the excess later. I've also put little bevels into the blade here just so that it has something to grip onto. And then of course our pin. Which there. That fits really nice.